My name's Margaret Maggie Rhodes, and I'm 58. For nearly 50 years, I was a wife, a mom, and the quiet backbone of Willow Creek Grove, a small organic apple farm tucked into the soft green hills of Vermont. Even though arthritis has stiffened my fingers, they still remember the rhythm of kneading sourdough and trimming branches at sunrise with my husband, Thomas. Just 3 weeks ago, I laid him to rest. Thomas and I had been together since 1980. We built it all, this land, this farmhouse, this life. But the morning after his funeral, something hit me. Maybe what we built wasn't what I thought it was. Or maybe it just wasn't enough to keep our kids close. Thomas passed from pancreatic cancer. 14 long months of watching a man rooted in the earth slowly fade. Day by day, his strength was stripped away. He didn't want the kids to know. Let them live a little longer without the weight of this, he whispered one night, drugged up on morphine. And because I loved him more than anything, I kept that promise, but honestly, I already knew deep down. Our kids, Brandon and Lila, had been drifting away from us long before Thomas ever got sick. Brandon, our oldest, chased a high-speed career in Chicago's finance world and hadn't been home for more than a few weekends in the last 10 years. Lila bounced from one failed mindfulness venture to the next, every single one of her projects bankrolled by Thomas's savings, always asking for just one more loan. I'd hoped that losing their dad might snap them back to who they used to be, remembering the orchard, those long dinners at the farmhouse table, all the love that built this place. But when they showed up for the funeral, I didn't see grieving children. What I saw were two businesspeople scanning the property like an investment. That night, after the service, I sat alone in the kitchen, eyes on the weathered surface of the table where we'd shared so many meals. I told them we could go through Thomas's things together in the morning. It was my way of offering a space to remember. But they clearly had other plans. The next day, sunlight spilled through the old lace curtains Thomas and I had chosen decades ago. I brewed a simple pot of coffee, the kind he liked, not that expensive stuff Brandon brought from the city. I sat at the table and waited. They came down dressed sharp, like they were headed to a boardroom. Brandon in a suit jacket. Didn't even take it off. And Lila? Silk blouse, hair curled to perfection. They looked more like they were about to close a deal than honor their father's memory. Mom, Brandon started, setting his mug down just so, in that same controlled way his father used to. Lila and I have been talking. She gave him a quick look, then turned to me. We think it's time to start settling things, she said. The property, the business, the house. I blinked. Settling? Did I hear that right? It's just practical, Brandon added. You can't run this place by yourself. And the house, it's huge, Mom. Too much for someone your age. Your age. That phrase just hung in the air. That I had stood beside Thomas through snowstorms and blazing heat to prune those trees. I ran payroll when we couldn't pay a secretary, baked pies for every local fundraiser, drove the damn tractor, and delivered crates to shelters. We just want what's best for you, Lila chimed in, smooth as a pitch. There's this wonderful retirement community downstate, Harborview Haven. 2 hours away. Activities, people your age, a comfortable life. I got up to clear the dishes, needing to do something, anything, to keep my hands from shaking. Then Brandon pulled out a folder. Dad talked to me about this last year, he said, sliding a pile of documents across the table. He wanted me and Melissa to take over. I glanced at the papers. Corporate letterhead from Brandon's firm, and Thomas's signature. Too clean, too perfect. He hadn't written like that in months, not since the morphine dulled everything. This didn't come from our family attorney, I pointed out. He was clear-headed when he signed it, Brandon said without flinching. He wanted this, Lila added quickly. A fresh start. There's a developer offering $7.2 million for the land. We'd be set. You'd be taken care of. A developer. That's what they had in mind. Paving over the orchard. Erasing a lifetime of harvests, of care and tradition, replacing it all with pavement and identical houses on winding streets. You're talking about selling your father's entire legacy, I said, barely above a whisper. Mom, come on, Be realistic, Brandon replied. The orchard isn't going to last forever. That's when something deep inside me ignited. A slow, smoldering fury stirred, one I hadn't felt since the day I chased a fox out of the chicken coop with a broom. I looked both of them square in the eye, my own children, and said calmly, "Let me see the will." Brandon paused, then pushed the folder toward me again. I didn't even touch it. "I'm going to bed," I said. "We'll discuss this in the morning." But I already knew there wouldn't be a morning conversation. This wasn't grief. This was execution of a plan they'd had in motion long before Thomas was even cold in the ground. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the bed Thomas and I had shared most of our lives, listening to the familiar groans of the old farmhouse and the wind rustling through the orchard trees outside. Every creak in those walls felt like home. But it was the silence in my children's hearts that suddenly felt foreign. By morning, the house smelled of coffee, not the comforting kind, but sharp, acidic, imported. Brandon's kind that I moved slowly, not just from the usual aches in my joints, but from something deeper, betrayal. When I finally came downstairs, they were already waiting, coats on, a suitcase by the door. "The suitcase wasn't mine. We packed a few basics for you," Lila said with a cheery tone that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We thought we could drive you down to Harborview today. Just to check it out. No pressure." "I'm not going to a retirement home," I said, pouring myself a mug of coffee. Brandon looked at his watch. "Mom, let's not make this harder. The paperwork's signed. The deal with the developers closes next week. You can't live here anymore." "This house has been my home since I was 20, I said, my voice steady. "This is where I belong." "It belongs to all of us," Brandon said, his tone flat. "Dad left it to Lila and me. It's time to move on." I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't see the little boy who used to follow Thomas around the orchard asking questions about blossoms and honeybees. I saw a stranger. Someone who saw me not as a mother, but as a problem to be dealt with. "I need to grab my medication," I said, backing away. "And a few family photos." Lila gave a little nod, clearly relieved I wasn't arguing. "Take whatever you want. We'll ship the rest." Upstairs, I didn't shed a single tear. I grabbed my pills, but also something neither of them knew existed, hidden behind the medicine cabinet, a panel Thomas installed back in the 80s. I found my passport and birth certificate in our closet. I reached behind Thomas's old flannel shirts and pulled out a heavy fireproof box, not filled with memories, but with something far more powerful. The original deed to 20 acres of land I'd bought before we got married. In my maiden name. Land with water rights. Land any future developer would absolutely need. When I came back downstairs, my purse was heavier. But I felt strangely lighter. "Ready?" Brandon asked. "Sure," I said, letting Lila loop her arm through mine like I was too fragile to walk on my own. I let them think they'd won. We drove past the blooming fields. Past the school where I used to read to first graders. Past the little library I helped fundraise for. But instead of merging onto the highway toward Harborview, Brandon turned down a deserted back road. 20 minutes later, he pulled off onto a patch of gravel beside an empty field. "This is where you get out, Mom," he said, like he was calling out a bus stop. Lila's smile faltered. "Brandon, what are you doing?" "She'll fight the will, drag this through court. This way is cleaner," he said. "She's got her meds, her clothes. There's a gas station about 5 miles that way," he added, popping my door open like this was all perfectly normal, and just like that, they left me on the side of a quiet country road with nothing. Or at least, that's what they thought. The car vanished in a trail of dust and cowardice. I stood there, coat flapping in the wind, holding the little suitcase they had so generously packed for me, but I wasn't scared. I wasn't shattered. I was unshackled. I didn't head for the gas station Cole so graciously pointed out. Instead, I turned toward town. Toward my next move. The cheap flats I had on weren't meant for gravel, and the spring sun was already heating the back of my neck, but I didn't stop. With each step, my resolve hardened. Everything I needed was tucked in my purse: ID, passport, my daily meds, and most importantly, the original deed to 20 acres of prime orchard land Cole and Elise didn't even know existed, land I bought long before Thomas and I said, I do. Back then, it was a backup plan in case our little dream with the orchard went belly up. Thomas called it our, just in case. Now, it was my escape route, and it wasn't just any old patch of soil. That land held the only freshwater spring on the whole property. No spring, no irrigation. No irrigation, no apples. No apples, no orchard, and certainly no shiny suburban neighborhood full of cookie-cutter houses. Why kids thought they had me backed into a corner. What they didn't understand was the dirt they were trying to sell, what they didn't understand was legacy, but I did. Nearly 2 hours later, my feet were blistered, and every bone in my body throbbed, but I finally reached the edge of Maplevale and the faded red sign for Dawson's Gas and Goods. It was a small, dusty place that hadn't changed a lick since the 80s. The kind of spot where folks still knew your name and bought things with crumpled bills, not apps. I sank down on the bench outside and just watched the world move past. To anyone driving by, I probably looked like a weary old woman with a suitcase, but I had something far stronger than they did, the truth. Hank Dawson stepped out from behind the register, wiping his hands on a ragged apron. He'd known me since before my kids were born. Mrs. Fletcher, he said, squinting. You okay? You're looking kinda pale. Just catching my breath, I said. It's been a long morning. His eyes flicked to the suitcase at my feet. Sorry to hear about Thomas, he said softly. He was a solid man. I nodded. He was. He paused for a second, then tilted his head toward the store. Need to make a call? If it's not too much trouble, I said. He guided me past shelves of dusty soup cans and 2 for $1 cereal boxes, back to a cramped little office. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart, Harold Kent, our family lawyer. Ella, he answered immediately, voice surprised. I've been trying to get hold of you. I figured you'd be at the will reading. I gripped the receiver tighter. What reading? There was a pause. Cole showed up with a will, but something felt off. It didn't match the version your husband and I finalized last fall. I need your help, I said, firm and clear. And your full discretion. You've got both. Be here in an hour. I hung up and turned to Hank. You sell prepaid phones? He nodded. Few left on the rack. Want one? Yes. And a bottle of water. He wouldn't take my money. On the house, he said. Mrs. Fletcher, anything you need, just say it. His kindness hit me harder than I expected, but I hadn't cried when I laid Thomas to rest, and I sure as hell wasn't about to now that I had a mission. And I wasn't done yet. Harold's office was on the second floor of a big, weathered Victorian that faced the library. He'd been our lawyer for more than 3 decades, the kind of man who still wore sweater vests and believed a handshake meant something. His secretary, Margaret, gasped when she saw me walk in. Mrs. Fletcher. Mr. Kent's waiting for you. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. Harold came out to greet me, and though his back had bent with age, his eyes were as sharp as ever. Ella, he said, not leading me to the formal desk, but to a pair of cracked leather chairs by the window. He settled into one, his expression serious. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about the funeral. The fraudulent will. The ambush over coffee, the ride to nowhere. The suitcase. The roadside betrayal, every last piece. That he didn't cut me off once. Just sat there, listening quietly while I laid it all out. His expression darkened bit by bit, jaw tight, eyes sharp. When I finally stopped, I reached into my purse and pulled out the little fireproof lockbox I'd been carrying since the funeral. From it, I handed over the deed, 20 acres, in my name. Land Thomas and I tucked away decades ago without telling a soul. Harold held the paper like it was a rare artifact. This, he breathed, this is gold, Ella. This isn't just dirt, it's power. The water rights alone make it untouchable. Without this parcel, they've got nothing. I nodded. I know. He leaned back, tapping the edge of the document like he was already a dozen moves ahead. The will Cole submitted? It's a fake, he said. I knew something was wrong the second I saw the signature. Too neat. Too steady. Thomas was on hospice care. There's no way. We'll fight it, Harold said, firm now. But these things take time. In the meantime. He held up the deed again. You still legally own the most critical slice of that property. Without your permission, they can't sell, build, or even dream. I sat back, letting that sink in. I want my home back, I said quietly. And I want them to really feel what they've done. Harold nodded, no hesitation. Then we'll make sure they do. First step, I'll draft a letter to the developer, warn them that what they were promised isn't legally viable. If they've got any sense, they'll pull out. Developers hate lawsuits even more than they hate missing permits. He stood up, suddenly full of energy. I also know a judge over in district court. We can get a motion to freeze any sale until we sort this out. I glanced out the window. Across the street, a young couple strolled past holding hands, blissfully unaware of the quiet little war beginning upstairs in this old office. I don't want revenge, Harold, I said, mostly to myself. I just want truth. And peace. You'll have both, he promised. Starting now. By noon the next day, Harold had filed an emergency injunction that effectively slammed the brakes on any transaction involving Maplevale Orchards. A courier hand-delivered the legal notice straight to the development company Elise and Cole had cozied up to. Within hours, the deal hit a wall. The developer, suddenly knee-deep in legal trouble and blindsided by the fact that the land's only water source was privately owned and omitted from the original deal, started backpedaling fast. Their lawyers scrambled, reaching out to Harold in a frenzy of damage control. I told them the truth, Harold said that afternoon, flipping through a stack of forms. The parcel's incomplete. The water rights are non-transferable. And your children? They don't have the authority they think they do. That evening, I got a text at IT. Was the first time I'd heard from Elise since the day she left me on the shoulder of a rural highway with nothing but a suitcase. Mom, please call me. We need to talk. Cole's freaking out. We didn't know about that other land. Can we just fix this? That I stared at those words on the tiny screen of my prepaid phone. No apology. No acknowledgement of the betrayal, just panic now that their golden goose had stopped laying. That I didn't answer. Later that night, Cole called Harold directly, trying to muscle his way back into control. Harold shut that down fast. All communication will go through legal counsel from now on, he told him calmly. They're just now realizing, Harold said after he hung up, how badly they screwed up. They thought I had nothing left, I said. But I had everything they never bothered to value. He gave me a quiet, proud look. You're handling this with a lot more grace than most. A lot of people would have gone scorched earth by now. I've lived too long with kindness in my bones to turn bitter, I said. But that doesn't mean I'll stay quiet. Outside, life in Maplevale carried on like nothing was different. Kids pedaled past on their bikes, a dog barked a few blocks down, someone was mowing their lawn. That IT was still a simple town. Still decent. And I planned to keep it that way. The land wouldn't be sold, not now, not like this. The orchard Thomas built, the life we nurtured together, wasn't some disposable asset. That IT was a legacy. That IT was more than just land. It was home. And I wasn't done protecting it. In the weeks that followed, I didn't set foot back in that old farmhouse. Instead, I found a small apartment above Lydia's bakery right on Main Street in Maplevale. Nothing fancy, just a cozy little spot with a balcony big enough for a rocking chair and a few pots of rosemary and mint. Every morning, the smell of cinnamon rolls and sourdough wafted through my windows. It wasn't the place Thomas and I had built with our own hands, but it was mine. And that mattered. I eased back into a life that felt more like me, started teaching again, quilting on Wednesday nights at the rec center, just like the old days. On weekends, I held gardening workshops down at the library, talked about composting, soil health, how to care for fruit trees without drowning them in chemicals. Teenagers showed up, so did retirees, and young couples with big dreams and dirty fingernails. They came because they knew I wasn't just talking. I'd lived it. That orchard held decades of work, of love, of weathered seasons. And people listened, not because I shouted, but because I meant it that I took the water rights from those 20 acres and placed them into a trust with the Maplevale AG Collective, a local group that helps young farmers get started. They wouldn't sell it. They'd protect it. They'd keep the trees alive. The way Thomas would have wanted. That was the legacy I chose. Elise and Cole kept quiet that I heard through the grapevine that the developer had fully withdrawn. The fake will was officially under review, and their reputations weren't doing too hot back in their polished city circles. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need revenge to feel real that I picked peace. But not at the cost of truth. The orchard stayed just as it was, blooming again come spring. Every time I walked past those rows of trees, I smiled, not with bitterness, but with the quiet certainty of a woman who got her voice back. They had underestimated me, but I remembered who I was. That I still think about that moment on the gravel road. The suitcase I didn't pack, the dust settling in the air, my own kids driving off like I was just another burden. To unload that it should have shattered me, but it didn't, because in that long silence, I heard the truth I'd been trying not to face for years. Love isn't blind loyalty, and being a mother doesn't mean tolerating betrayal just because you raised the ones who betrayed you. Cole and Elise thought they could write me out, that I was too old, too tired, too heartbroken to fight. They thought I'd roll over and hand them the keys, but they forgot. Before I was a wife, before I was a mother or a widow, I was Ella. Graced at a woman who built a life with her own 2 hands. And I've never had to raise my voice to be heard. What they mistook for weakness, my silence, my trust, my love, was the very thing that carried me through. If you're hearing this and you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told your story doesn't matter, listen to me. Your power isn't in how loudly you fight, that it's in how deeply you know what you stand for. When you hold that line, even quietly, it rings louder than any betrayal. That my orchard still stands, that my name is still on the deed, and my life, it's mine again. So if anyone's ever told you, this is where you get off, I say this: walk, if you must. But don't leave your worth behind. Walk with purpose, walk with quiet strength. And when the time is right, tell your story. You never know who might need to hear it.